Hello there, and welcome to Gunner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gunner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week we are at home at the Emirates for a London derby against West Ham. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove. How are you this evening?
Doing okay.
Hmm.
There's not a lot to make me feel any better this weekend, that's for sure.
I was about to say, I hope your weekend went better than it did when it started on Saturday morning. Or I guess I don't know. That's always an interesting question, right? I watched live on Saturday morning. When did you see this one?
Yeah, late Saturday into Sunday morning.
Ugh.
Watching a full match replay. Yeah, not a
Ugh.
great way to cap off the day.
No, no, not at all, not at all. But we're gonna do it anyway because that's what we do around here.
Oh yeah. So in slightly cheerier news, we had the draw for our Champions League spot, right?
Yes, we did. That came on Friday. It came on Friday before the game. We drew PSV, so that's a familiar face.
Yeah, one that we've stomped on a couple times. So
I mean, we say that, but I have to say, we've done well against them at home. Away has been a challenge.
okay,
The Philips Stadion has not been the easiest atmosphere for us to go into, and I'm sure it'll be quite rollicking for a knockout game because we've seen them in the group stage of the Europa League and the
right.
Champions League. Um, certainly they've been flying this season. I think I saw what was that? Yeah, they're currently sitting second in the Eredivisie, the Dutch league. They've scored 71 goals in 23 games,
Oh boy.
which is 20 more than Ajax, who's scored the second most goals. Ajax, on the other hand, is 5 points ahead of them.
Yeah.
So I guess because they've only conceded 18 goals on the season, but
Yeah.
that's but yeah, they're a dangerous team. They can score, and honestly, that does kind of make me a little nervous given the circumstance we're in. So those games will be in the first week in March. The first leg will be on a Wednesday, I believe, and the second leg on a Tuesday. Sorry, look at a calendar. No, had that backwards. First leg on a Tuesday, second leg on first leg Tuesday the 4th in the Netherlands, and then the second leg on Wednesday the 12th at Arsenal Stadium. We can't call it the Emirates in the Champions League, but
So what do you think about the order playing away first? How would you prefer it if you were able to pick?
that's generally the ideal because that way you sort of you set the tone and then go into the second leg and sort of say to yourself, okay, what do we need? Especially if you need a result, going home is much more preferable to playing away. And I mean, we've sort of seen it. I'm trying to remember. Well, yeah, last year I know we had. Well, last year we had it both ways in the knockout stages. We played with Sporting. We played. We were at Portugal and then at home. Lost the first leg, but then won the second before going to penalties. And then with Bayern, we played them at home, and the draw there at home was kind of dispiriting because then we were going to Munich,
Right.
where we of course subsequently lost and were eliminated. So it's generally the ideal that you would go in that order. You would play the second leg at home. But you can also easily argue that look, if you're the first legs at home, you roll up a big score and then you kind of put a lot
Right.
of pressure on them to come at you, much like we saw a little bit with the Newcastle there in the League Cup, getting the Emirates first and then going up to St James's Park. Now, of course, they won that first leg, which obviously does
Yeah.
um,
Worked
we should
against
also
us a
throw in,
little,
by the
yeah.
way, they actually did the entire draw for the rest of the competition. I believe the home
Oh,
away leg is going to be drawn for each subsequent round, or at least for the quarters and the semis. Obviously, for the final, purely for bookkeeping purposes. But we are bracketed now to play PSV, and the winner of our tie will face the winner of a Madrid derby, Real and
hmm.
Atletico will face off. So that's kind of a terrifying thing awaiting us. And then a potential semifinal matchup could include either of the other two English sides, Liverpool and
Hmm.
Aston Villa, are all on our side of the bracket, which I think it's fair to say is definitely the tougher side with the three English sides, Real Madrid. PSG is there. They get Liverpool. I'm sure Liverpool's not terribly thrilled about that, but that's how it goes. Yeah, I just look at the other side. I mean, you got Barcelona, who's not bad, but is not a vintage Barcelona. Same with Bayern, although they're better, a little bit better this year. We know Inter Milan. We know they can be tough. but I think it's definitely fair to say our side of the bracket is a little tougher. On the other hand, that's just kind of how the season's gone. Of course, we're going to do this the hard way. What other way is there? But yeah, first things first, PSV. Certainly, I think familiarity breeds a little bit of contempt insofar as, we know each other fairly well over the last 2 seasons. I don't, they're certainly not going to be intimidated coming to the Emirates, but we're also not going to be very intimidated going there. There's a lot of familiarity, which could
Right.
theoretically make for a slightly more open tie. You see a lot of times in these Champions League knockout games, a little bit of feeling out, especially in the early part of the first leg.
Right. Yep.
So we'll see how that actually plays out in practice. But the other option was to draw Feyenoord. There were the two Dutch sides eliminated the two Italian clubs, and not interesting little side note here. I don't really care in the sense of I'm afraid to play one of Feyenoord or PSV, but Feyenoord this past week recently hired as their new manager Robin van Persie, who used to play for Arsenal, and left on less than pleasant terms. So what I didn't want is 2 weeks of listening to Robin van Persie stories. Is really what this is about. I don't care one way or the other happens to Feyenoord. I will take all the Van Persie stories you want if we were to face them in the final, which is the only time we can play them at this point. But given the choice, I guess I'd rather we've seen this team before as opposed to having to hear about Van Persie. But that's just.
Let me also ask you: has Jurrien Timber played for either Feyenoord or PSV in the past, or possibly both?
No, I believe he's an Ajax man. He came up through
Okay.
he came up through the youth system.
Oh,
So
okay.
and Ajax has a very well known, very well regarded youth system. So chances are he would not have done that.
Gotcha.
Actually, but now that you're asking, I wonder if he went on loan anywhere. No, he played young Ajax, and then Arsenal, and then obviously, and he's also played for the Netherlands. But
Yeah.
that's different.
Orthogonal, yes. All right. So, meanwhile, as we sit here, we have just wrapped up, or are at least in the process of wrapping up, the opening weekend of MLS for this season. So, how did yesterday's big Miami NYCFC match go? I wasn't able to catch it myself.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, well, big, big, obviously, is sort of relatively speaking. It's big because Messi was playing.
Yeah.
It was kind of an interesting game. Went 2-2 in the end. Miami scored early. City leveled. Actually, but right before they leveled, Miami picked up a red card on
Oh.
an obvious DOGSO right outside the box, which led to
Hmm.
a cheeky little routine for the goal. City got one in the second half, and then in what ended up being 11 minutes of stoppage time, Miami was able to get a goal back. Messi powered through, found an open man, and they scored 2-2. Messi's never beaten New York City, which is fascinating.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
I'd say for being down 10 men most of the game, though, Miami was quite dangerous. They clearly have a lot of attacking talent. It was rather funny to see Luis Suarez go toe-to-toe with Maxi Morales, which partly because Maxi Morales is like 5 feet tall. He's extremely short, but he's also in his late 30s. He's one of the few players on the field who might be older than Suarez and
Right.
Messi and those guys, and has won MLS Cup, which Messi has never done. So,
Yeah.
you know, so that it's fun to see some of those conversations taking place. A lot of young guys, a lot of inexperience for New York City. So there were some difficult moments in the game, but I get all things considered, getting a point in the opener is not a bad start, especially given they, after opening in Miami City, will now head west to play at LAFC. Yeah, welcome to the season, buddy.
Yeah.
So that's, well, it only gets easier from here. Anyway,
Yeah, kind of like how Arsenal's season started off with the harder fixtures a little
yeah,
bit.
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that an opening of the season. I also did catch the second half of Houston and Dallas, or rather, I flipped on literally right at the moment when a Houston defender passed the ball to a Dallas attacker, and then chipped the keeper to tie the game, and
Oh.
then they got a late goal as well.
Yeah, okay.
Disappointing. From speaking entirely from a Texas perspective, it's not so much that Houston should win; it's that Dallas should also lose. Anyway. Anyway.
I haven't spent enough time in Dallas yet to take that personally.
As a former current resident of Houston and a former resident of Fort Worth, I'm obligated to take pot shots at Dallas.
All right, well, I don't think we can put it off anymore. It's time to talk about the West Ham match.
Really, I thought we were just going to talk about Texas all night. We could do that.
We could try that. We could do a totally different show next week.
Yeah.
And yeah, next week, and when we're not recording that, that'll be our Texas show. We just won't release it. So this match occurred yesterday as we record. It was our 25th match in the league this season, with the sad trombone score of 1-0, not to the Arsenal this
Mm.
time. Frustrating match to watch. Really, yeah, it was disappointing.
For all parties, and I realize we don't want to start with the post game, but I think we should start. I mean, this was Arteta's post game comments. Very disappointed, obviously very angry as well. We didn't hit the levels today, and I'm very much responsible of that. So I'm very angry. He was asked about lacking attacking options. I refuse that completely because I am talking about the standards of the players and the team that we played today, me included. That was nowhere near the levels that we have to hit to have the opportunity to win a Premier League. We were very consistent, yes, but football is about what you do today, and today, nowhere near. So
Yeah,
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 um,
that sounds about right.
yeah, it's easy to point to that, and we've talked about the many games they played, and you talked about, especially in late January, how tired they looked at times. We talked about the injuries, how they impacted some of the red cards, and how that's impacted the game. But the fact is, we just weren't very good yesterday. And credit to West Ham, played their game well, but this is what it wasn't good. It wasn't good, and it was a desert. We deserved this result. So
Yeah, basically.
and now, as we record this on Sunday, we should also point out earlier today, Liverpool beat City
They did.
in the Etihad, which isn't a huge surprise after they did draw with Aston Villa midweek. So we were potentially able to close the gap, and we did not do that at all. In fact, we are now 11 back heading into the Forest game this week. So
Right. Not
we
a
haven't
good
even talked
spot
about
to
the
be in.
game yet. It's already just so depressing.
Yeah, I know. Well, I began optimistic. We saw Marino starting. We saw Calafiori starting. So a couple
Mhm.
guys who have only been late substitutions recently were starting the match. That was good to begin with.
Yeah, I gotta say I wasn't thrilled with that. It's easy to say that in retrospect. Marino, I understand why everyone was happy, and I know we talked about this a little bit last week. Like, full credit to the guy for getting good header on the ball, which is a skill, and then a pretty deft finish for his 2 goals. But he's putting him up and starting with center forward. This isn't like a wind up toy, or it isn't a video game. You just plug the player in. It's like, oh, it's going to be fine. And but to his credit, as critical I am as I'm being about that, I did think he had a couple of opportunities early on that if Havertz shanked them, even then we wouldn't be super bothered. I mean, we'd be bothered by it because we want the goals, but I don't think we would have been particularly downtrodden. I don't think you can just simply throw them down to Marino's not a striker, but it does kind
Right.
of, you're asking a lot of a guy who isn't meant to score goals. We've talked about this. Scoring goals is a skill, and
Hmm.
and it's one that you're asking a lot of this guy to do. And then you threw in Calafiori, which to me that said, because remember the calendar gets a little funky now. Obviously, we have West Ham on the weekend. We have Forest away on Wednesday. So it's a quick turnaround and a road game against a team that is obviously third in the table, higher up. And so to me, with Calafiori starting, said Miles Lewis-Skelly is actually our starting left back, and that he was being saved for Forest on Wednesday. That's how I
Hmm.
took that. And again,
Interesting. Yeah.
but again, we like Calafiori, and he also early on, I'd say in about the first half hour, I thought we generated with some good chances. Marino had a couple misses. Calafiori had a rocket that went right to the keeper, but it's good to
Hmm.
see him taking those shots.
Hmm.
I thought in the first 20 minutes or so, I thought we were there, and it's like, okay, if we can keep that up, West Ham can't just sit back and defend all game. But we didn't keep that up. That just
No.
that's yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I did see some dangerous positions that Marino was able to get into. Like it did start off promising. I'm with you there.
Yeah, it did, but I guess I also wonder, and I don't think we've sort of talked about this in the past, right? About how we mentally perceive the game and how we carry all of our baggage of seasons past in here, whereas the players are approaching it a little bit differently. But you do have to start to wonder, especially based on the way we've seen this happen a couple times this season, and of course looking at the front line and the players and the options to not score in that first hour, does that start to weigh on them a little bit? And there were a few moments as we got into the second half where it felt like you're doing that thing where you wait for the perfect shot when you need to pump
Mhm.
it into the box or just in a and they had a few. West Ham blocked a bunch of shots too, but it just
Mhm.
felt like those you're not going to with this lineup is not going to give you 90 minutes of trying to think of one of the games we had where we just put the other team under siege and was just ran up the score a little bit. Even if we didn't run up the score, like 2-0 felt like a second goal felt like a hundredth. And it just this wasn't that game.
No, and yeah, I think there's one particular time I can think of where I think Partey, had he been ready and fully aware of his surroundings, he possibly could have gotten off a shot. I think that was later. That wasn't a super early attempt, but yeah,
I d
he almost could have possibly had a clear shot and just didn't take it, and then the window passed. But
Yeah, that was especially I think that was in the second half. I couldn't
yeah,
tell you what it was. I think I can pick the ball came to him kinda awkward at his feet, and there were a
yeah,
couple of those too you could see the ball comes to you, but it's a little awkward and, okay, you're not gonna be able to turn and shoot on that, but, yeah. And then, that gets us to, I like Calafiori. I think there's a lot to like about him and his game, but he's definitely a much more offensive-minded player, and I think we saw that a little bit toward the end of the half when West Ham scored.
yep,
Um, so I think we
yeah.
actually talk about that.
Definitely. So yeah, he did his best to chase down Wan Bissaka, who was making a break with the ball. The way that whole play started, it was just kind of it broke loose. Like I think it was from a free kick. I think.
Maybe.
No, I guess now I'm looking at it now. It's from open play,
Okay.
but the ball just kind of broke loose in the semicircle at the top of the box, and I think it was Bowen actually got it away and then continued his run forward. Yeah, and Wan-Bissaka
Yeah,
carried up the field. Calafiori tried tracking back and just got outplayed. He just lost the duel.
he's got to do better on that. I mean, again,
Yeah.
his strength is going offensive, and I mean, I've heard this comparison made. I'm curious what you think that Calafiori is actually the same player as Zinchenko.
It's I don't know. I don't know if I've seen him play enough to necessarily say that yet, but I
I
can
mean, I'll
see where
say
that's coming from.
Yeah, I'll say it as a play. He's a player who's definitely got a lot of confidence going forward and is able to move the ball offensively. But there are definitely holes in his defensive game. You excuse them a little more with Calafiori because of his age. He's 23. He's young. There's still
Yeah.
clearly another level he can ascend to, which we really probably can't say about Zinchenko at this stage of his career. He is who he is. If he's not, there's the on the perhaps even on the other side of that hill, as it were. Yeah, I mean, really though, Calafiori has to do better with Juan Bissaka. He gives him way too much space to run in. He allows him the opportunity to make the somebody's got to in basketball. They tell you got to step in, you got to stop the ball.
Hmm.
When a player's driving forward, you just got to step in front of him. Somebody's got to get in his way, make him pull or turn, and he didn't do that there. And it's just that's disappointing. And then you with Bowen, who is not a bad player, but like Wan Bissaka getting the run in though is only part of that problem. It's not as if West Ham floods the box with three or four guys. It's one guy. It's just Bowen, and you've got three experienced defenders: Saliba, Gabriel, Rice. Like somebody's got to take the man. Somebody's got to get ahead or something on the ball. Yeah, it was a good cross and a nice finish, but that you can't let Wan Bissaka get the run. You can't let Bowen get free in the box like that, especially given they know it's going to be a struggle to score. West Ham opened the game with 5 men in the back. Like they were never going to do anything except bunker and counter.
Hmm.
And you just can't have that kind of moment where you switch off that way, especially three guys with that skill level and that experience. And it's frustrating because I mean that does sort of that did kind of I mean it didn't put it in into it. We had enough pressure that you could have felt at least a little confident. But the problem was, especially after halftime, our game just Just it didn't get any better.
No. No, I mean, we kept the ball, we kept, there are moments of pressure, but nothing really sustained for more than a few minutes at a time.
Yeah, and truth is, we got vastly worse as the game went on. I mean, we had some solid moments early on, but frankly, their goal was coming for a little bit because it wasn't the first counterattack they had gotten. It wasn't the first time Wan-Bissaka had gotten loose down the sideline like that or down the wing.
Mhm.
And then you finally get to the point where that you go down and it just was a poor performance. I mean, how crazy is this? Arteta made subs, non-injury subs, in the 56th minute.
Right. Yeah, he clearly wanted to change something up, and what do you think the goal was there?
Well, I think there was two things. Well, I remember there were two subs there, 56 minute. The first one, Calafiore comes off, Lewis-Skelly comes on.
Yep.
I do think that's a bit of a shot at Calafiore. Like, hey, that wasn't good enough. Um, and because we know he's capable going forward, but we know Lewis-Skelly is too, and he's a converted midfielder, so perhaps he could bring you something a little more dynamic in the attack. But you are sacrificing at least a little bit of defensive skill, potentially depending on tactically what he's thinking Lewis-Skelly will do. And then as far as Rice coming off, Declan Rice was very poor. This is arguably the worst game he's had as an Arsenal player. Um,
I mean, do you think any part of that is it being West Ham? Do you think that factors in even subconsciously?
At this point, I don't think so. First year,
No.
yeah, but at this point, he's been an Arsenal player for a year and a half. I mean,
Yeah.
it's West Ham. Heck, half those guys, the manager he had at West Ham, David Moyes, he's now at Everton. They've got a bunch of those players he would have played with aren't necessarily there anymore. I mean, it's not as if they were even. It's not as if he was even at the London Stadium, where okay, maybe is a feeling there. This was just bad. And the nicest thing I can say about that situation is it's very easy to look at a player like Declan Rice and think, "Oh man, I can't pull him. We paid £100 million for him. I can't pull him. I can't ever pull him. You got to be good enough." And he wasn't,
Well, yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's why he's got to sit. Putting on Zinchenko was a choice. We've kind of it's been one of those things that we've sort of thrown out into the ether as like, oh, it's a possibility. Zinchenko in the midfield, and I mean, again, I don't want to read too much into this game in particular because I think there were a lot of things that were wrong in this game, or at least a lot of things that weren't going well. To sit here and say, "Oh, Zinchenko as a midfielder will not work," but oof, it did not work, man. And then we could say for yesterday, it did not work. He did not do anything
Yeah.
particularly effective or interesting, and you could easily read that, especially given how well it wasn't working. You could easily read that as desperation. And here we are. We're 55 minutes. We're 10 minutes into the second half, and Arteta's feeling desperate. I mean, that's where you wonder psychologically, does that have an impact? We talk about how are the players experiencing what's happened. All of a sudden, you look and your manager's made a pretty dramatic change that we've never really seen before. So it's
Hmm.
it's an interesting one.
Well, at the same time, like if he made the determination that Rice should come off, he's having an off day, get him out of there before he does any more damage. Who else was really a possibility is the other problem. Like, so if that's a foregone conclusion, he needs to take Rice out. Who besides Sinchenko was there really to put on?
Yeah, I mean, the only other real midfielder you would have put on could have been Jorginho, but Jorginho doesn't, at that point, you're all. I mean, anytime Rice comes off when he's playing with Party, that's going to necessitate an adjustment in Party's game as well. I
Hmm.
think this is the kind of game where you would have liked to have Marino available to drop back into the midfield, and obviously he can't do that because he's playing up top. Um, I do think there's a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? I do think there's a little bit of we're sort we move too many pieces out of play. You start to move too many pieces out of place, and that really sort of cuts your options.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean we can flash forward. I mean, do we want to keep going on substitutions for a second here?
Yeah, sure.
So
So yeah, that the first one was Zinchenko and Lewis-Skelly on. Then next we
yeah,
had Raheem Sterling on for Nwaneri. Yeah.
yeah, and so we'll come back to this obviously. So the red card
Right.
obviously just changes how you think about substitutions and some of the different things you want to do. But I mean, it was a little frightening to see Nwaneri limp off, but I think that's also a case of he is 17 and like just carrying a full load as a Premier League player is just going to be a lot for him at this age. Um, I haven't heard anything, and that didn't give the impression there's any sort of real injury. I think it was kind of just sort of a tired fatigue for coming there, and that's kind of the other option. I heard some of this pregame, or at least in the days leading up to it. I know we're all down on Raheem Sterling. I know, and we've sort of said it here. Like I don't know that
Hmm.
I have any real confidence in him to do anything, but basically to bench him like that one game into the we have no other forwards game. I mean, there's two ways that can work. Psychologically, maybe he does work really well as a super sub, and you can sort of put him on and say, look, you don't have to lead the line. Just come on for 10 to 15 minutes and just empty the tank for 10 to 15 minutes. And maybe that's what he's
Hmm.
got in him. The other part of that is a player who's clearly struggling to find his legs, clearly struggling to find his place, clearly struggling to find his confidence, is now getting benched, and that's gonna do something to that's gonna do something else to your confidence as well. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he was bad, but I also don't think he really. I mean, like pretty much the rest of the team, he didn't really do anything.
Hmm.
Which brings us to the final sub, Saliba coming off for Ben White. Welcome back, Benny White. Uh,
Unfortunately, not under better circumstances.
yeah, in retrospect, I would have now at this point, I'd be kind of curious to go back and see because White sort of slotted in more as the right back, and they were trying to get him to have a few more overlapping runs on that side, which is what he normally does with Saka, and it works that really well in that triangle with Odegaard. But that would have necessitated Jurriën Timber sliding back in as a center back, which perhaps he did. I didn't really notice at that stage. I mean, it's great to see Ben White back. He seemed to move around okay. He late had lashed a shot that it went wide, but you watch some of the replays. We never got a really good one, but that was close. That one
It
looked
was very
like it
close.
might have been
It was only
close.
it was only a couple feet above the post. That
Um,
was painfully close. Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know what to read into Saliba coming off as opposed to Gabriel. It might have just been the side of the field. Saliba's the right-sided center back. Ben White is a right-sided center back. So that probably makes the most sense. I don't think it's necessarily a commentary on Saliba, but it does sort of feel a little bit. Again, that's hard to say because I feel like Ben White getting a run out was probably a planned thing.
Hmm.
And he is an offensive. He is much more of an offensive player. He is able to go forward more than Saliba generally does. So perhaps he would have, added that little extra bit of urgency. But yeah, it was just that kind of game.
Hmm.
What was it? We had 35 touches in the opposition box, but had what, two shots, and
Right.
neither of them. One of them, that was the Calafiori one, it looked nice, but it was right at the keeper. Um,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
just overall, all around, just a poor performance from so many different players, and that was before someone got thrown off with a red card.
Right. So this is our second straight red of the season for Miles Lewis-Skelly. The first one, thankfully, under super controversial circumstances, did end up getting taken back. This one is not getting taken back.
Now, on the bright side, it is not for violent conduct, which carries with it the 3-game suspension. So you only be suspended one game, which of course will be the Forest game, which is disappointing. But okay, yeah. Um, when they called the yellow, I think there were more a few of us going, whew, that's orange if I've ever seen one. And as soon as they went to VAR, that one was pretty obvious to me.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that really started shifting, at least the commentators' discussion of it, was when they showed how far off his line Raya was, with
Mm,
him that far forward. The fact that if Lewis-Skelly hadn't acted, he could have chipped in a goal at that point, and that's what
yeah.
really made it dog so. It seems like.
It was that, well, that, and also I think just the distance. Also, I think I think Saliba was the other defender on the far side of the field. Yeah, the combination of those things. I mean, and we saw this is essentially what Saliba got red carded for. Was at Bournemouth earlier this year. The same kind of thing. Yeah, there was another defender, and maybe he was far away. He was far away from goal. Maybe he catches up. But to me, let's put it this way. Again, that's one of those. If it had gone the other way, we'd have been screaming for a red card, and I think we'd have been
Hmm.
justified in it. It
Oh
was,
yeah.
some of that's, again, Lewis-Skelly, a young player. He's in a tough put in a tough situation. It makes a really bad challenge. But again, that's kind of one of those you can put a little bit on him, but I think you can put a lot on the rest of his teammates for sort of, I don't want to say hanging him out to dry because he's back there in large part because everybody's pushing forward because they need the tying goal.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's just yeah, and it annoys me that it was Kudus because Kudus. And when I looked at their lineup this before the game started, I was like, oh god, Kudus is the guy we got to watch for. And then he
Mm.
didn't score, and I was like, who? Maybe I missed that one. Nope, there he is, earning a
Yeah.
red and getting our guy thrown out, and yeah. But again, they were going to sit back anyway. We dominated possession. We pushed forward. We created opportunities, not great ones, but created a few
Hmm.
opportunities or potential. We created the possibility of opportunities, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, right up until the end when we got super desperate, and there goes David Raya into the box.
Yeah, so that was interesting for a couple reasons. I haven't seen that happen too many times. It
Mm,
was also interesting because throughout the match, I was watching with my almost 8-year-old son, and he was super confused for at least half the match about which end we were trying to score in because both keepers watching at home basically looked identical. They were both in shades
mm.
of bright yellow. Um, does that's one thing I wanted to check with you on. It seems like I don't remember seeing that before. Like the keepers can't clash with each other as well as the team, their teams, the other outfield players. But apparently that's not the case because if that were, then those two kits wouldn't have been on the field at the same time.
I mean, it's interesting you bring that up. I can't say I noticed that they were similar. What I'm now looking to do actually and see is who outfits West Ham.
Yeah,
Because obviously some
I
of this is
believe they were Umbro. I'm
okay.
pretty
Yeah,
sure if I
I would say I
remember
don't
right,
think
they're
they're
Umbro.
Adidas. So yeah, so there is going to be Adidas has their line of keeper kits. Um, and I mean I'm just looking through some of what I
Well, we
see.
always have at least two options. Like this season, I think it's the yellow one and a black one. There's usually a black one in addition to whatever else they have going on.
Right, there's a yellow and a black one. Is a pink is the other one, but with a lot of like
Yeah,
detailing and flair, so to speak,
yeah,
on it. Which is pretty normal for a keeper kit.
yeah,
Trying to pull up, see if I can find. Trying to
yeah.
see if I can find
Theirs is
something with
just
it.
just a yellow, just like not a highlighter yellow, just kind of a normal yellow, like you would see
Yeah, I mean, I
in a
guess
box
I
of crayons.
okay. Yeah, I guess I have to say I don't really know the rules necessarily on that. I mean, on some level, it doesn't, as long as they don't clash with either of the outfield teams, right?
Right,
Because, wait, what color were West Ham's shirts?
black.
They were black.
So
So it
might
might
that's
have
why
been a
Raya
case
couldn't wear
he has to
his
wear
change. Yeah,
he has to
yeah,
wear the yellow, and I bet looking at it, I mean, usually right, usually it happens where the kits work out. I mean, again, we talked about this right with the amount of because of the amount of white in our kit, we couldn't wear the
yeah.
red one at Spurs, and Spurs had to come to their change kit when they were at the Emirates.
Right.
You'll see things like that now and again. I have seen an instance, and I cannot remember who it was against, but we actually had to wear one of our change kits at home because they were playing a team that only had kits that were red and white, and so I want to
Yeah,
say it was in a cup competition or something like that. And it's
probably. That would make
weird,
sense. Yeah.
but it's the kind of thing that happens. I guess again, this all has to be approved before the game. Like the keepers come out and
Right.
like yeah, there's paperwork for this stuff. The league has a record of who's supposed to be wearing what. Like this is all worked out well in advance.
Sure.
Um,
So it was something that was just kind of funny to me that he was having trouble. I mean, to me, it's very clear you can tell which goal each team is trying to score on. You know the
yeah,
outfield player's color is that, but it became a little bit funnier when David Raya was actually in the opposition team's 18-yard
yes,
box. It became a little bit tougher to see what was going on there, and then he had it was really great actually on his part. So there's chaos in the box after that late corner kick. Was it the corner kick? There's also a free kick. I don't remember which one it was, but I guess it was the corner kick. And then
yeah,
after the ball broke free, and I think Ward-Prowse was driving the ball back, and Raya chased him down and got to the ball first. He has legs on him, which we haven't really gotten to see too much moving in a forward direction.
Yeah, get on your horse, David Raya. Yeah, he honestly was the best play of the game because he chases Ward-Prowse out, and then he very cleanly dispossesses him too. Like
Yeah.
that was a really clean, like that's the kind of the kind of tackle Saliba and Gabriel go for every time. Well, Gabriel's a little more physical, but like that was almost Saliba-esque in the way he just pulls it off of him very calmly, very quietly, and just kind of turns it around and goes back the other way. It's unfortunate it had to come in the service of well, I'm about to say it was arguably it was the best player Arsenal had all day. Is really the only way to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just it's frustrating, yeah, because we talked about the level, and I will say this: it's easy to look at the table now and say we're 11 points back, and Liverpool has a game in hand, and that is terrifying. It's frightening, and you're starting to see a lot of the. It is going to be very difficult to overturn them and win a title at this point. But just the one thing to throw in there. Here's the positive note because I try to strike a balance on this. The positive note on this is over the last few years, City and Liverpool and Arsenal as their competitors have sort of conditioned us to think that the way you win a title is to basically not lose any games after January. And in a sense, that's because that's what they've done, but that's not normal. Like that's not a thing that typically happens. Like it is not hard to look at Liverpool and see wobbles. We saw the draw to Everton, the draw to Aston Villa, and in between they beat Wolves, but everyone came out of that game going, "Oof, boy, they probably deserved another draw there." I mean, Liverpool's a good team having a great season, or rather, a good team with Mo Salah having a great season. I mean, apparently, like seen somewhere statistically, he may be on pace for one of the greatest Premier League seasons in history. Which is kind of funny then that his contract's up and he's probably going to leave at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But then again, you walk out with a Premier League winners medal. I mean, it's not a bad. If you're going to go, you got to go in style. It's going to be tough to overturn them, but at the same time, we can't approach it with the idea, oh, they're just going to win everything from here on out. But 11 points is substantial.
That's a lot. Yeah.
I don't want to just turn it into, our focus has to be on the Champions League now. But I do think that's an element of this is as we start going forward, because I think I feel pretty confident about us being able to hold on. I know this performance was bad, but like in a sense, it's like, okay, it doesn't get worse. It can't get worse than this. We were terrible the other day.
Yeah.
As long as we don't do that going forward, I don't think there's any real concern about us finishing in the top four.
Well, yeah, and I mean, hopefully soon we'll have Saka back. I think that will be a big deal when he returns. Who else was supposed to come back in March? Was it Kai Havertz?
Martinelli. No,
Martinelli.
Havertz is done for the year. Havertz and Jesus are done for the year. But to get Saka and Martinelli back, how different is Martinelli? I mean, we've talked about him. Like he is actually, because of his speed, he probably closes down Wan-Bissaka on that run. He is a little bit more defensively responsible than Trossard. He's not a great defender by any stretch, but he is a little bit more defensively responsible than Trossard. Does he assist Calafiori in that, and allows Calafiori to push a little further forward, as opposed to maybe with Trossard, you want Lewis-Skelly, who might be a little bit more defensively responsible, which again, weird to say about a kid who's 18, but but that's the thing. We're now about to face a stretch. We've got I'm just going to schedule 5 games between now and the break, the international break, which is we're sort of this is all external. I haven't heard the club obviously won't say anything, but I feel like Saka doesn't come back before the international break. Martinelli doesn't come back before in part because if they come back for the international break, then their national teams, especially England, are justified in calling them up, and I'm pretty sure Arsenal doesn't want that. I don't know what England has in this break. I assume I want to say probably Nations League, which I don't know, quite where they are and all in their process with that. So, but you just look at it, the next 5 games, you look ahead at Forest, at PSV, at Manchester United, home to PSV, home to Chelsea. That's what takes us into the break. Forest are third in the table. They're obviously very good. We know PSV is a Champions League side, especially away. United's kind of garbage this year, but I hate going to Old Trafford.
Mm-hmm.
Champions League. And then Chelsea, which, Chelsea's had their struggles as of late. But I feel like we play them better at Stamford Bridge than we do at home. I feel like that's one where the road team seems to have the advantage. And so, it's of course we're getting that one. And then we're going to get effectively 2 weeks off to close that out before we get to Fulham, which is like on a Tuesday, the April 1st. It's gonna be a weird one. But anyway, yeah, we've got if you're thinking about this in terms of blocking out our schedule, we've got these 5 games, or really if you think about it, in that we talked about earlier in the year, right? That seeing the season in chunks. This one
Yep.
started with Leicester. I mean, everyone feels good about Leicester, and it was great. Marino scored those 2 goals. We were pretty awful for the first 80 minutes, and
Yeah.
West Ham is a lot better than Leicester. So
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be a grind. I think it's gonna end up being a lot of 1-0 to the Arsenal if we get through it. But I mean, we talked about this as well. You can get to a Champions League final without scoring a goal.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
A
penalties. Yeah.
lot of 0-0s and penalties.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's effectively my Arsenal entrance story is the 2006 run to the Champions League final, where they beat in succession Real Madrid, Juventus, and Villarreal, all 1-0.
Oh wow.
They had something like 10 straight 10 consecutive shutouts in that competition, or like 1,000
Wow.
minutes without giving them a goal. Which, if you look back at that, you look at that defensive line, and think, them? Really? They didn't give up a goal for 10 games? Yeah. And it wasn't, and Barcelona was up a man most of that game and didn't even score until like after the 80th minute. So
Well,
you can
and
do it.
for what it's worth, I mean, we still do have the best defense in the Premier League. We've still conceded the fewest goals. I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming the 1 goal for West Ham didn't upset this, but that we've conceded fewer goals than any other team. So
Yeah, I have not actually looked at us. I know we're pretty much neck and neck with Liverpool on that. The difference, of course, being Liverpool scored substantially more goals than we have, or at
right.
least certainly. I mean, I don't know how substantial is substantial, but let's put it this way: goal difference so rarely comes into play in these situations. Even think about last year with City, right? That we were thinking, oh man, goal difference, how's it going to be? Is it down
Hmm.
to the wire? Nope. All that mattered in the game was whether if they dropped any points or not.
Well, right.
Goal difference ends up
But
not playing.
yeah, not from a not from a table position point of view, but just if that's our strategy is like hang on, concede nothing in the Champions League, this seems like, as we've been for the past few years, a good team to try that strategy with because our defense is so tight. So
Certainly this year.
yeah,
Of course, we drew the team that has 70 goals in the domestic season so far. So
put it to the test, right?
you're gonna find out.
All right, it's gonna be tougher this week than it often is when we have a less than stellar performance. It can be tricky, but who is your player of the match this week?
I'm gonna say David Raya. I didn't really have a lot to do. I can't really fault him for the goal. He's caught out of position, and that really needs to be dealt with by pretty much everybody else on the field before it gets to him. And then honestly, the play where he chases down Ward Prowse and steals the ball off him is by far, I think, the best play we had all day. So to me, Raya was I can't criticize his game in the way I can just about everybody else's. So David Raya is almost by default, I think.
Yeah, no, and I'm there with you. I think something else to add to commend him also is throughout the match, playing a super high line, an extraordinarily high line where he was on the other team's half more than just when he got pulled at the end, but also throughout, helping keep pressure, helping us try to break through, keeping the ball on their end. He did that even more than we've seen in the past. Even crossing the midfield line a couple times and effectively so, like where you saw we didn't have to track back like at all. We basically maintained our position a couple times when the ball would have otherwise been on its way back enough that we would have had to. So yeah, definitely. I had him in my notes, but ultimately, since you picked him, I'll go with my other choice, which is Trossard. I think I saw a lot of quality from him. I saw him trying to break through, moving the ball, some good attempts. nothing that materialized like we saw with everyone else. But he took some good shots. He created chances, not maybe more, maybe not better quality than Marino or Calafiori did, but at least more of them. So there's something for quantity.
I mean, I'll be honest. That's a generous judgment on Trossard. I thought Trossard was pretty anonymous in this game. Honestly, yeah, I think yeah, it's hard to pick somebody in this one. I gotta say, this was a tough one.
Yeah, definitely not easy, but yeah, we work with what we've got. All right. So meanwhile, what is up for next week?
Right. So yeah, we've talked about next week. Midweek game Wednesday away to Nottingham Forest. A big game against the team that is not too far behind us in the table. I'm looking now; they are 6 points behind us, so not super far. But that's a 6 point swing, a win for them, and they're suddenly right on our necks. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super concerned about them or City, not in the sense that oh, we've definitely beaten them, we're definitely better than them, but like obviously our focus is still up the table, and if we're not, if for them to catch us, we have to keep dropping points. Now, again,
Yep.
obviously, having to play Forest is going to be does make that a distinct possibility. But I do think I think as long as we take care of our business, it's not going to matter in terms of what Forest and City do from here on out. But it's still, it is the end of February. The today is February as we record this is the February 23rd. Our last game is on May 25th, so we still have 3 whole months. Got the math
Right.
right, 3 whole months to see how this one goes. So yeah, midweek game against Forest, and then a week off before the midweek Champions League game the following week as we move into March. It's almost March, guys.
Yeah. And as far as what's up next for our show, because of the weird situation with like two consecutive midweek matches without a weekend match in between, we plan to record midweek and then skip the weekend before PSV, and then we'll catch up with PSV and that next weekend's match in our 2 episodes from now. So we will talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to hit the subscribe or follow button in all the places you see our show: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or anywhere else. We'd really appreciate that. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Keep the faith, Gooners.